You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's Thursday again, and another edition of the Mighty Blue podcast. This week, we're on to episode number 476 of the show, and we've got another packed show for you. First up, we're going to meet Nicole Markovich, or Droplet, who thru-hiked the AT in 2022, then parlayed the lessons that she learned into a business. Nicole had been a teacher and found a way in which to combine her teaching skills with her newly found backpacking skills. She'll be on the moment to share her story, first about a hike and then a business venture. Then, in our Mighty Blue class of 2025, Dave is past the 100-mile mark. Anybody who's done the trail will know that that means he's gone up and over Albert Mountain, a seemingly innocuous blip on Far Out and the topographical maps. That was a shocking surprise to me when I first came across it in 2014. It's pretty vertical, I tell you. Dave has been relentlessly positive in our conversation so far, so I'm not expecting Albert to have presented him with too many problems. Then, in what is one of the trickiest things for me to edit, Beth shares with us the songs that mean something to her as she's about to undertake this journey in just over a week's time. If I had to pick one of the lists between Dave's and Beth's, it's no contest. I'm definitely more aligned to Beth's choice of music than I was with Dave's a few weeks ago. But I hope you've enjoyed this little section with their music. I think the music can give you a real insight into somebody's thoughts and character, so I hope you know more about our two after hearing their choices. Just before we hear from Nicole, I wanted to thank those of you who listen to the show regularly for reaching out to me regarding my recent unfortunate collision with a car while I was out walking. I'm recovering slowly, but the therapist tells me that the Camino trip is still possible. In fact, I've resumed walking locally this week, so fingers crossed. Now, for the last time in their sponsorship for the show, there's this. As I say, this week is the last of our sponsored ads for TSX Challenge. I've got to tell you, I'll still be mentioning them from time to time, for free, because I believe so strongly in Chris, his team, and the adventures they provide. Chris asked me this week to tell you any story and my own personal opinion. Now, if you know anything about me, I always give my personal opinion, and this will be no different. One thing that came to mind for me was the evening that we had together on the day we had just all got to the top of Whitney, and we were back in camp having eaten another great meal. We were gathered round a fire, faces gleaming, tired, but happy in what we'd achieved. And at that moment, there was something I wanted to share with everybody. I'm not sure I'm going to do justice to the moment, but imagine yourself sitting around a campfire with friends and sharing your deep thoughts. Many of you know that I have an awesome AT map, which is on my wall as I speak. This map has everything personal to my 2019 thru-hike, with photos, where I stayed each day, elevations, my completion certificate from ATC, my summit picture, even the dates and direction that I travelled each day. But there's one more thing. That thing was a saying that I've used in the past. When the guy who puts these maps together, Larry Knight at Red F Mapping, asked me for an inspirational phrase or saying, I thought back to hiking the AT with friends, and I once said, there's never been a mountain I couldn't get over. And almost as a throwaway quote, I gave him that. But it wasn't true. I'd failed the John Muir Trail 3 times and I'd never been able to reach Whitney. It really stuck in my craw, and whenever I looked at the map, it was a big regret that I told Larry to add that. I always felt like a fraud. But as we sat around the fire and I told my friends about the map and about that saying, I said words to the effect that it was now true. There has never been a mountain I couldn't get over. And TSX Challenge gave me that. A gift so much more than they realise even now. Now, I've loved doing these ads for you all each week. I truly have. But they're over now. So, as a gentle reminder, this is the last week to get 10% off your 2025 trek with TSX. Our promotion with them ends Sunday, March the 29th. Use the code MIGHTYBLUE at checkout for your last chance at savings. And then there will never be a mountain you can't get over. So, before I get too misty-eyed, let's hear from Nicole Markovich, or Droplet. You know, the Appalachian Trail brings all sorts of people from all walks of life to it. And I've heard lots of those stories and reasons for being there and how lives are changed. Today, our guest is Nicole Markovich, and she had her own reasons for getting out there, and it really did change the trajectory of her life. Hey, Nicole, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was a reasonable summation, wasn't it? That it did change your life getting on the trail?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you went on an AT thru-hike in 2022. How long had the idea of a thru-hike actually been in your head?
I think I first heard about the AT back in like 2014 or 2015, something like that. I was visiting the Smokies for the first time, and I was out on the trail, and I didn't know I was on the AT. I was going out to Charlie's Bunyan, and it had started pouring rain, and it was miserably raining. It was so heavy, and I saw a sign for a shelter and an arrow, so I was like, oh, let's go check that out. So we went down, and there was an AT shelter, and there was a thru-hiker in there, and I didn't realize it was a thru-hiker, but, he didn't look like...
You could smell him. You could smell him, no doubt.
Yeah, he was kind of scraggly looking, a big, beard, and he had a tortilla, and he was putting, I remember, like, tuna packets and, like, chips and stuff on it, and just... and just, eating that, and I was like, what is this guy doing? Like, he's clearly not just out here for, a day hike like we were, and he said he was going to Maine, and I thought that was just nuts, like... I had no idea that you could hike from Georgia to Maine, that was even a thing. So that planted the seed, I think.
Good. Well, so you were already a hiker then in some form. But were you a backpacker as well or not?
No, not at all. So I grew up doing all kinds of outdoorsy stuff, and I've been camping pretty much my whole life. And I started hiking, I think, in high school. And just day hikes, and I think the furthest I'd ever hiked was maybe 8 or 10 miles on a day hike, but no backpacking, except I had one night of backpacking experience before I started the AT.
That's one more than I had.
Yeah. And it wasn't even with my gear. It was all with like borrowed gear and a school backpack.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about your gear in a minute because that wasn't a great start for you in terms of gear, the amount you had to take with you. And what was it about that bloke sitting in a shelter eating disgusting food that thought this is something I want to do?
I don't know. I think it was to me it seemed like such a huge thing. It seemed impossible, and I wanted to someday see if I could do something that was impossible. And so it was kind of a bucket list thing for me. And I thought, maybe I'll do it someday when I'm retired and I've got the time and the money to do it. But things changed for me a bit.
Though. Yeah. Now you've done it. Does it still? I mean, this is a stupid question, and I'm trying to think what I mean by this. So I'm thinking on the fly, which is a dangerous thing for me to do. Does it still seem impossible? I know you've done it, but is it still such a difficult thing in your mind?
No, not at all. I think after finishing the AT, I've kind of felt like you can do anything. You just break it up into smaller pieces, and bit by bit, you can do pretty much anything you set your mind to.
That's very much the view I get from a lot of people who thought it was difficult to do to start with, but then once they actually do it, think, yeah, I can do this. And it's that great feeling that I'm sure everybody, I certainly got it. You feel very liberated by the fact that you're doing it. Getting past 100 miles is quite something. Getting past 200, then 500 and 1,000. I mean, it's just amazing every time they stack up. And what were you actually doing for a living at the time?
So I was a teacher. I taught high school chemistry, mostly chemistry, but also some physics and some other science classes in Illinois. And I taught for about 9 years, I think. Yeah.
So you were teaching science and you decided that 2022 was going to be your year. Or had you tried to go before? Had COVID been had you tried to go during COVID?
No, I didn't. I was at home. I was teaching online during COVID. That was fun.
Yeah, not. Yeah. So you decided you wanted to go on the AT, and I know that you took a leave of absence at your school, didn't you, to go on the AT?
Did.
What did they think about it? You saying that's what I want to do?
Well, I think my boss was very supportive of it. He knew I was going through some things in my life, and that I needed to kind of I needed a change of pace for a while. And so I asked for the leave, and I was very fortunate that they granted that for me. And they were flexible even with when I came back, because I said, well, I don't know how long it's going to be.
Right.
It could be 5 months, it could be 7 months, or it could be 2 weeks before I quit, have to get off the trail, So, I had a lot of support from my
That is very understanding of them, extraordinarily understanding of them to do that. Now, you mentioned one that you were going through some things. One of the complications in your life at the time was your marriage. Do you want to tell us briefly about that?
Yeah. So when I started my thru-hike, I was actually in the midst of a divorce. And so I had been married for only a couple of years at the time. And but the guy I was with, we'd been together for about 7 years. And he was an addict and an alcoholic. And it was a very traumatic experience for me. And
were you a drinker?
No, I never really grew up drinking. It wasn't really part of my family or,
Yeah.
No. And so when I finally decided to leave, I felt like I needed a fresh start. I needed to get away and do something different. So
the AT
that's kind of when the window opened for me for the AT.
Isn't it funny how that is? There are times you would like to do it, but the times you just can't do it, because you originally told me when we spoke the other day that you thought this was on your bucket list to do, but you thought when you retired, you're only in your mid-30s or something like that?
Yeah, I was 32.
Right. It's okay. You're in your mid-30s now then, yeah. It's 35, I guess, yeah.
Yep.
And the opportunity to do it doesn't always rise, but when it does, you have to either go through that window or it's going to slam on you, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. And I remember at the time, living with somebody that suffers from addiction is really, really, really difficult. It's a family illness. And I was very sick at the time, just trying to deal with that. And so I remember in therapy, I told my therapist that I just wanted to get away. I wanted to leave this place. And she said, well, where would you go? And I said, the AT. Like, that's what came to mind.
Wow. Isn't that cool? That is cool.
Yeah.
And something you said when we spoke previously that I wrote it down, it really struck me, was that the trail changed your perspective in that you felt that you weren't walking away from something where you clearly were walking away from that situation.
Yeah. More
that you were walking towards something.
Yeah. And
do you know what you're walking towards, and how did that shift occur?
Well, I think I started to feel that like while I was on the AT. So when I started, I really felt like I was, I needed something different, and I was kind of running away from my past and that life that I had been living.
Sure.
And it was a drastic change for me. I got rid of all of my stuff. I got rid of my house.
Wow,
I left my job.
That is drastic.
I put everything into a storage unit. I had like nothing to go back home to. And so I really was like running away. But then somewhere on the AT, you set goals for yourself every single day. And
Sure.
and I had my eyes set on Katahdin the whole way. I remember Hawk Mountain Shelter was my second night, and we were sitting around. I started in March, so I was in the bubble. There were a bunch of people there.
Sure.
And the question was posed, like, how far are you going? And I said, well, Maine, is there another option? Isn't that what we're all doing? And, I didn't realize that other people had different ideas of what they would do out there. Some people would just stay until it wasn't fun anymore, or till they ran out of money, or they were only out for a couple weeks,
Sure.
But for me, I was going to Maine. And so every day I was moving towards that goal. And so at some point I started to feel like not only was I physically moving towards Katahdin, but I was like emotionally moving forward too. I think there's a lot of emotional healing that happens out there.
That's interesting because, it wasn't, to me, going out there as a 61-year-old when I first went, that it wasn't even feasible that I was going to get to Katahdin. I never really thought it was impossible anyway. I thought Neil Gap would be pretty good, 30 odd miles. So you had that feeling you can do it. So it's a question I've asked people in the past, actually. Had you failed to do it, where would that have left you?
I think it would have been pretty devastating for me. I told myself that
apart from homeless, by the way.
Yeah, right. I told myself I was not going to stop unless I physically could not hike anymore. And that meant like a broken leg. And even then, if I broke my leg, I might just wait it out for a while and then get back out there. I was not going to quit. And I think that sort of mentality is part of what got me the whole way. But it also was a bit stubborn, and maybe there were some downsides to that too. I had a couple of injuries that I suffered through, and maybe I should have taken some time off.
What happened? What'd you get?
Oh gosh, in the very beginning, I think it was coming down Blood Mountain. It was like raining, it was freezing cold. There. It was like sideways sleet when I was coming down.
Nice.
And I messed up my knee.
Ooh.
And I think I was just doing too much too fast, like a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. And I think I had tendonitis in my knee. And within a couple of days, my left knee was pretty badly swollen. Right. And I couldn't bend it all the way. And I thought, I should probably go get this looked at. But I was so stubborn. I was like, I'm not getting off the trail. I'm not going to go see a doctor because I know what they're going to tell me. They're going to say, stop hiking. And I wasn't ready.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
I should have.
I had that experience recently. As you know, I got injured, got hit by a car, and I went to the UK, and my niece said to me, "You should go to the doctor," because I was flying back the next day. I said, "Why?" Because they're just going to tell me not to fly. I'm going to fly. So I'm going home, so there's no possibility of me not going. And that thing, if you don't want, there's no point in going to a doctor if they're going to tell you what you don't want to hear, is there?
Exactly. So, but in doing that, I was like trying to baby my left knee. So I'm, hobbling on the trail, putting all my weight on my left or my right leg. And in doing that, I got tendonitis in my right Achilles.
Gosh.
So it's like one injury led to another injury, and it took time for it to heal. But I think I maybe should have listened to my body a little bit more in the beginning.
Did you find that, you said you were heading towards Katahdin, which is very, very positive and great. Did you find that you had that within you already, or the trail was teaching you that resilience?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. The trail, it's not very forgiving.
No, it's not. It doesn't give a crap what you think, does it?
No, it does not. It does not. And I often said I had a few phrases that I used frequently while I was out there. And,
especially when I was in pain.
Yeah. One of them for me was that the mountains are humbling.
Oh, yeah.
Just when you think you've got it figured out and everything's going the way you want it to, they'll throw something else at you. And so there was always another challenge that I had to face pretty much every day. And another thing that I told myself all the time is that there are no easy days on the AT. There are more difficult days and there are less difficult days, but there are no easy days. Because anytime I had it in my mind, I'd look at the map and say, oh, this looks like it's going to be an easy day. Well, then something would happen, whether it was the weather or
that is a very good piece of advice for people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are less difficult days. There are difficult days and less difficult days, aren't there? But there's absolutely not any easy days at all. No. My easiest day was going from Boiling Springs to Duncannon. We did 26 miles that day, which for an old guy was pretty damn good. But it was flat, basically all the way. So that always helps.
And that would have been an easy day for me, except I think this is the spot where it was. There's like a cornfield that you walk across or like next to.
That's right. Yep.
And it was a beautiful day. It wasn't very windy or anything, but I heard a crack of a tree. And I thought, oh, the tree's coming down. It was really, really loud. And so my hiking partner and I just started sprinting off into the cornfields as fast as we could because you don't know where that tree's at, it's fallen or anything. Yeah. And then my heart was racing. I turned around and there was no tree. It must have gone the other way. But, like stuff like that. You just never know. No,
you learn to manage your hike. And so you headed to Georgia. Was it with the support of friends and family, or were they kind of hesitant? Or did they think you were doing this just to get away from marriage or get away from work? Or what was their attitude towards you doing this?
Well, I think when I first brought it up, they kind of thought that I was maybe a little crazy. Of course, yeah. And you were, yeah. And I don't think that they really thought I was going to do it because I would often come up with like these big elaborate ideas and just not always follow through with them, Like I would come up with business plans all the time because I always wanted to run my own business. Right. And so then when I said I wanted to hike the AT, they're like, yeah, okay. And I remember telling my brother, and he's like, oh, that sounds cool. What is that, like a couple weeks? I was like, no.
How long did it take you? Did it take you 6 months?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. But then I think they knew it was going to be real when I finally put in for my, leave at work. and kind of made it public. I posted it online, made the announcement or whatever that I was going to do this. And they were very supportive.
And I presume, you told me that, and I don't know whether it was because your marriage was heading, you were heading apart from your husband. You told me you put in a lot of personal growth before you headed on the trail, and that you put those tools to use on the trail.
Yeah.
In what way was that?
So, like I said, I was in therapy for a while, and I also went to Al-Anon meetings before I got on the trail, and those are really, really helpful. If anybody is, Al-Anon is like the counterpart to AA.
Right.
So AA is for the alcoholic, and then Al-Anon is a group for anybody who's been affected by someone else's alcoholism.
Sure.
And so it was a really great support group. So I've been doing that for a while. And then in therapy, I've been practicing mindfulness and meditation. I've been doing a lot of journaling, a lot of reading, things like that. And so I was able to take those tools that I had learned in my support groups and also in therapy and work on those while I was on the trail, which I think was really helpful.
I'm sure.
You can't expect the trail to fix any of your problems. The problems are still going to be there when you finish. Yeah. But if you go out with some, things that you can work on, I think that's helpful.
And your pack weight was the classic pack your fears, wasn't it? How much did it weigh at Abacalola?
No, my pack actually wasn't too bad.
You told me it was.
No, I told you about Justin's pack.
Oh, okay. I totally got that wrong then in that case.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that story too. So my pack was about 31 pounds when I started. I think it was probably the same at the end. I kept...
I've got 31 pounds. Then I've got 54-pound pack.
Yes,
okay.
I'll tell you that story.
Yeah.
But my pack... I kept getting rid of things, trying to get my weight down as I was going. I'd send stuff home or swap things out. But then as I was getting stronger, I would add more things in. So I had so many luxury items that I don't think my pack ever got any lighter than it was in the beginning.
If you could do it, that's fine. And was it a bit of a struggle those early miles physically for you or not?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So I grew up in Illinois, which is super, super flat. It's like Florida flat. And all my hiking experience pretty much had been in flat land. And
uphill's different, isn't it? Definitely different.
It is, yes. I remember, and I tell people this all the time that are having a hard time with backpacking, is my first few days on the AT, really my first few weeks, going uphill, all these people would just like fly past me. And I felt so defeated. I would have to pick a tree just, 10, 15 feet ahead and say, I got to get to that tree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then I'm going to pull over and wait. And then, catch your breath and then go to the next tree. Then it
became switchbacks, didn't it? You turn a corner, right, I'll get to the next corner before I stop. I rarely made it to the next corner before I had to stop.
Yeah. It was probably not until 1,000 miles in that I remember getting to the top of a mountain. I don't remember which mountain it was, but I remember getting to the top and I thought, I didn't have to stop the whole way.
Oh,
it only took me 1,000 miles.
Doesn't matter. You got there in the end.
Yeah.
So you you did the approach trail. So that night you stayed in the Springer Mountain Shelter. What was the atmosphere like with all those new hikers at the start of their adventure? I remember for me, it was very excited and everyone was agitated and talking all the time.
Yeah.
What was it like for you?
It was a little different. So my first night, I expected there to be a lot of people at the Springer Mountain Shelter, but it was me and 3 other guys. And I think 2 of them were staying in the shelter. One was tenting and I had a hammock. And by the time I got there, they were already, set up and had their dinner and everything. And I think it was starting to rain and I didn't want to cook my dinner out in the rain. So I asked if it was okay, do you guys mind if I come in the shelter and eat my dinner? And of course they didn't care. And so we just sat and chatted for a few minutes, but it stormed so bad that night that I just got into my hammock and, waited out the storm.
Oh, right. But you didn't put your hammock up in the shelter, did you?
No.
Oh,
no.
I'll say people do that as well.
I didn't want to sleep in the shelters. I thought I would never sleep in a shelter. I didn't want to be around other people. I was very I wanted to do it by myself and be by myself.
So tell me then, how did that work out? This is one of the best parts of your story, by the way. Well, actually, was this guy, what's the guy's name? Sorry.
Justin.
Yeah. He's the guy with the 54-pound pack?
Yes.
Oh, right. And you met him that night?
Yeah. So we'll just go back a little bit. At Amaclola state park where you sign in. They have you like fill out your information. They weigh your pack, and then they give you the little spiel before you go, And when I signed in, my pack was 31 pounds, and I looked a few names ahead of mine, and one was 54 pounds. And I thought, oh my gosh, like that person's never going to make it. Who's carrying 54 pounds out here? Like, clearly they haven't done any research, Of course, I have only backpacked one night, and I think I know what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And so I get to Springer Mountain Shelter, and when I come in to have my dinner, we're just chatting, and I said, some idiot out here is carrying 54 pounds. Can you believe that? And then the guy sitting in the corner said, that's me. I was like, oh, no.
What did he have in there?
He probably just a lot of extra stuff. He had
really?
He had actually quite a bit of backpacking experience. He had been training to do the AT for a while, and he had been on several section hikes, like multi-day. I think maybe 100 miles might have been his longest section. But he had always backpacked like with friends and stuff. So he would bring, extra, I don't know, like games for hanging out. You bring stuff to camp.
Yeah.
And so he just brought it all. He had like a 2-person cook set, a 3-person tent, lots of extra food.
Oh, that's funny. So you met this guy, and you were on the verge of divorce, and you became hiking partners originally, and then you started a relationship, and he's still your boyfriend now.
Yeah, he is.
So you went on. Did you hike with him from that day all the way to the end?
So kind of on and off. So the next morning would have been our second day leaving Springer. He kind of waited around, the others were packing up and leaving.
When you know.
He had his pack on, and I was like, he's not leaving yet.
Yeah,
and I was slow to get out of camp. I was never in a rush to leave camp. And then he asked if I wanted to hike with him, and I said, sure. So we hiked together that day to Hawk Mountain. And then the next day, he up and left in the morning, and I figured I probably wouldn't see him again. Sure. But then we had exchanged phone numbers the first day. And so the next day we're going, I think, to Gooch Gap. Right. And he had, he was already gone. I hiked by myself that day, or I met some other people. And there was trail magic at Gooch Gap, and they had hot dogs and sodas and everything. I was like, this is amazing. So I sent him a picture, and I said, hey, did you get hot dogs at Gooch Gap? And he said, no, they weren't set up. You missed it.
Bad luck.
And and he was at Woody Gap. And I said, well, if you wait at Woody Gap, I'll bring you a hot dog. And so I stuck a hot dog in my backpack.
You two are as subtle as shit, weren't you, really?
And I hiked it out to Woody Gap, and I met him there with a hot dog. And I think after that we hiked every day together.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, by the way, before we move on to aqua blazing, which is interesting, you said you had a hammock. That's an interesting choice for a new backpacker. How did you make that choice?
I think I had just done a lot of like research and reading online and gear reviews and stuff like that. And for some reason I thought a hammock would be more comfortable. It would be better. And so I started with a hammock, and I think I kept it for the first 500 miles. And I actually really liked it. I sleep really, really well in the hammock. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any problems with, staying warm or anything like that, but it doesn't give you the space to like sit up and spread your things out.
No, I know. Yeah.
So 500 miles in, I think in Damascus, I switched out from a hammock to a tent setup, and then I tented the rest of the way.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, Shenandoah National Park, I've heard about aquablazing, never done it, would never know where to go.
Yeah.
But that becomes part of your thru-hike, those miles, blue blazing effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell us about it. How many days is it?
So the aqua blaze I did, I think we did 8 days. And so
wow. How many miles is that?
It was 150 trail miles.
Jeez. Mm-hmm. Didn't know that was that long.
Yeah. So I was doing all the blue blazes. I loved going to see, things off the side of the trail.
Sure.
And for me, I was not a purist. I didn't need to see every single white blaze. Just as long as I got from Georgia to Maine of my own manpower, then I was okay with it.
Yeah.
And so when I proposed the idea to Justin that maybe we could aqua blaze, he thought that was awesome. But then he thought, well, maybe we should come back and hike those miles that we missed. Because he really, I wouldn't say that he was a purist, but he really wanted to hike,
Sure,
every mile of the
sure.
AT. But after 8 days of aqua blazing, I got out my phone and I got on Google Earth and I tracked how many miles on the river we did, zigzagging back and forth on the river.
Yeah.
And the Shenandoah River parallels the AT.
Yeah.
And it also flows north. So you're going the same direction. And it was about the same number of river miles that we did compared to the hiking miles.
Wow.
So I was able to convince him that we had done it. We were good. We didn't need to go back and hike those miles.
Quite right too.
Yeah.
But you're enjoying the hike at this point. Obviously, you're with a new person, which is great. But were you enjoying the hike itself? Because you said you went out there for you. So was it giving you what you wanted?
Yeah. So I would say that, after Justin and I started hiking together, we would hike the same amount of miles in the day, but he was a little bit faster than me.
Right.
So we would hike in the morning together for maybe a couple hours, and we would plan where we would camp that night or go to town or whatever. And then he would shoot off and he would get to camp before me, and I would hike most of the day by myself, which I really enjoyed. And I think I needed that. And part of that was that going out there, like I said, I wanted to do it for myself and
Sure.
I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on me. And so having that alone time during the day, it was good. It really did that for me.
Sounds like a good combination, actually.
Yeah.
You told me when we spoke that you found the White Mountains to be very difficult. They're supposed to be difficult. I mean, everybody finds it difficult. Were you getting nervous with them? Or did you find them? Because it is definitely a step up, isn't it? You suddenly realise, oh my gosh, these things are much tougher than anything we've seen so far. Was there nerves involved in that?
Yes. So I would say that I wouldn't say that I'm generally a nervous hiker, nervous person, but I was definitely getting some anxiety about the whites. And Far Out did not help at all because anytime I would go on Far Out, even before the whites, you click on something that's coming up and you can read the comments on it.
Oh, don't do that. Don't ever do that.
It's 1,000 people could climb over this mountain and have a perfectly good time,
Sure.
but 10 people climb it and have a terrible time, and then they get on Far Out and they leave the comments.
That's right.
And so it's like everything you read is just the worst possible thing coming up. And so I would get in my head a lot and I'd build a lot of anxiety about that. And so
take the information, don't take the opinions. It's pointless.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I always had to tell myself to make sure that I wasn't losing it was I had to remember to choose faith over fear, because I would get fearful in my mind that these
Sure.
bad things were going to happen. And I just had to have faith that everything was going to be okay and that I could do it, but yeah, the whites were so challenging.
But as I say again, they're supposed to be. So yours is, this is a realization we all get, and it is darn tough. But it makes it, I also think it's the most beautiful part of the trail, personally.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And part of the challenge I had was not just, physically, it's a lot more demanding, but also before the whites, I don't remember if it was in Pennsylvania or Virginia, but I found out that I have a fear, not of heights. I'm okay with heights if I have good footing and I can hold on to something. But there was this one section where you had to go across a ledge. I think it was in Pennsylvania. And it's like a big rock slab or a section of slabs that kind of slant off to the right.
Right.
And as I was stepping across these, my feet started to slide out from under me and my trekking poles were sliding. And without even realizing it, I sunk down to the rock and I just grabbed onto it with my hands and I was shaking and I was crying and I had no idea what was going on. I was just having this reaction to it, And Justin was ahead of me and he turned around and saw what was happening and he came back and sat with me and just, helped me to calm down and catch my breath. And I realized I have this fear of falling off the side of the cliff.
Not unreasonable, by the way.
Not unreasonable, but it was also, it was uncontrollable for me.
Wow.
It was really difficult. And in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when I get to the whites? Because, I had heard about this rock climbing type of stuff. And so every time I encountered a situation like that where I felt like my footing wasn't secure, I had to face that fear over again. And so I had to kind of deal with that just little bit by bit as I got to the whites, which also presented an issue for me on Katahdin.
Well, I'm going to say that you're closing in on
Yeah.
Katahdin at this stage, and that is obviously a tricky. I'm going to ask you about it in a minute, but more for you and Justin, you were closing in on going your separate ways, weren't you? Did you discuss that, or was this one of those unspoken things?
Yeah, we did. We had discussed early on that we didn't want anything to be too serious, and we wanted to make sure that we each were able to hike the hike that we wanted,
Right.
hike your own hike.
Sure.
And so we always said and reminded each other that if you ever want to keep hiking, if you want to hike faster or slower, you do that. There's no hard feelings. Or if you need to get off trail for some reason, we would be okay with that. And we just weren't sure where things were going to go after the hike. He lived in Tennessee and I lived in Illinois, and we had, different lives to go back to. So we didn't know what would happen.
So you climbed Katahdin together.
Yeah.
You had, looking at your pictures, you look so damn delighted in your summit picture. Everybody does really, but you were just screaming your head off. It looks like you're screaming your head off. You just had a great day. It was quite a nice weather?
It was a beautiful day.
Yeah, it looked lovely blue sky.
It was, and it was, there was a storm coming the next day.
Oh, wow.
So
Good timing.
we had to, we were trying to time it so that we could be there before the storms came.
Sure.
And so was everybody else. So when you get into Baxter State Park, there's that Birch's campground for thru hikers, and they only have 12 spots.
That's right.
And like I said, I'm not an early riser. I was not about to get up at 3:00 in the morning and go wait in line. So I said, well, I'll just get there when I get there, and we'll figure it out. The trail provides; it always does. And so we get there, and the 12 spots had been taken. And 2 other spots they had found for numbers 13 and 14. They look for cancellations, like if in one of the other campgrounds, right? So they placed those 2. And then Justin and I were 15 and 16, and they could not find us a spot anywhere.
Wow.
And so we weren't sure that we were even going to be able to summit that day. But we told them, we said, oh, well, we met some, other section hikers in the 100-mile wilderness, and they have a reservation. Like maybe we can go find them and impose ourselves on their campsite. And they're like, well, you can go look for them, but if you don't find them, you're going to have to leave, and come back tomorrow. So we did that. We were able to go in, and it took us all day, but we found some people that were willing to put us up in their in their shelter for the night.
That's lovely. So you got there, you touched the sign, you screamed at the world, as you do. Yeah. So hike over, you went back to Illinois and he went back home to Tennessee. Yeah. And you went back to work at the school, which, by the way, they were so good keeping that job open for you, weren't they? Yeah. And yet you quit pretty soon after, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So when I finished, I kind of had a hard time going back to society, I think. I think a lot of people do.
Sure.
That post-trail depression they talk about. And I finished on September 12th, I believe, and then got back to Illinois. And I just was not ready to go back to work yet. I said I need some time, to get things settled. Right. And my boss was like calling me like, hey, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And so I finally went back. I want to say it was like maybe the end of October.
Wow.
And I took some time off, and I was staying at my parents' house for the time. Right. And then I was able to go stay with a friend back where I was living, where I was working. And I went back to work, and it was so challenging. Yeah, I love teaching. I love working with kids. I love working with people, but the job is a stressful job.
It's a different life, isn't it? It's just a different life from what you suddenly grown to love this life. And obviously Tennessee was still calling you, wasn't it? So
it was, yeah.
When did the idea to start a guiding company hit you?
So I finished out that semester. I taught in November and December, and then I put in my resignation, and then I moved to Tennessee, where Justin was living. And I knew that, well, I needed to get a job, obviously. So I started putting in applications everywhere. Yeah. I did not want to teach again, but I wanted to do something sort of in the education realm. And so I was applying for like curriculum development types of positions, stuff like that. And I had several interviews and just nothing stuck. And then like I said, I'd always wanted to run my own business, and I didn't know what that was going to be. And then I don't remember how I found out, but I somehow found out that guiding was a thing. Like I didn't even know that you could like hire somebody to take you out and show you how to hike or backpack or whatever.
Sure.
And so when I discovered that, I was like, well, I can teach and I can backpack. So maybe I can teach people how to backpack. And then Wildwood Hiking Company was born.
So you got the company started in early 2023. What were you offering at the time when you first started? One or two? I mean, what were the trips? Because I've got on your it's Wildwood Hiking Company. I've got on your site, and you're offering quite a few different hikes. When you first started, what were you offering?
Oh gosh, I can't remember. I had listed a few different trips on my website when I had started, and I want to say they were like maybe week-long trips or something, or beginner trips, shorter ones. And I had enough gear to outfit a few people at the time. And in 2023, I only took out a handful of people because I think when you first start out, just trying to get visible online.
Yeah, of course,
get your name out, right? It takes time. And so I had a few clients that I took out, and those trips went well. We had a good time. But then it really kind of kicked off in 2024. I started offering 3-day backpacking trips for beginners where I provide all the gear and the food and everything. And then longer trips.
What sort of food do you provide?
So I like to show my
Snickers
hikers.
and peanut butter?
Yeah, I like to show my hikers like there's different things that you can do. So you can, buy pre-made freeze-dried meals. So we'll do that for one night. But then I'll do another night where we do like a freezer bag cooking meal. So
nice.
I really like, I don't know if you've tried the Skirka beans and rice recipe. That's a really good one by Andrew Skirka. It's got it's got instant rice in it and refried beans and like taco seasoning. So that's pretty good.
Right.
Nice. We do oatmeal. That's a traditional hiker food.
Yeah, I know. Shocking stuff.
Yeah.
Never eaten it since.
And I usually like to do maybe like a cold soak lunch or something like that, just so they can see different things.
Sure. And it's very specifically, with one or two exceptions, a women's hiking trip. I was about to ask if that was a deliberate choice. Though, of course it was. Stupid question. But why did you choose to do it that way?
So when I started offering trips, I had some women's trips and some co-ed trips. And the women's trips really filled up and the co-ed ones didn't as much.
I've noticed that, by the way, on your site.
Yeah.
All the women's ones, quite a lot of them are gone already. There's still places there. But the co-ed one, totally open by those things.
Yeah. So, and then talking to my clients, it's just different when you go out with a women's group. I think women feel a lot safer and more confident when they are with a female group and they have a woman as a guide.
I do agree.
And so, you can talk about women specific things, but it also helps build some confidence, And I tend to think that, I don't know, that guys think that they'll just go out and they'll figure it out, we'll just go out with our guy friends and we'll figure it out. And a lot of the women that I talk to are like, no, we want a professional to teach us how to do it and how to do it right and be safe and have a good time. And there's a lot of camaraderie.
I've got to tell you what, though, you're absolutely right with that. Men are so damn stupid hiking. I know that when I started, and I've told this before, so I'll roll your eyes if you wish, listeners, but I reckon I started, there were 75% men, 25% women. When I finished, it was 50-50.
50-50.
Because men are dumb. They do stupid things, they get injured, they go too fast, they run, they show off in front their mates. And it's just ridiculous what they do. So, I admire you for doing that. And I think it's absolutely the right thing for a woman who wants to learn how to do this to go on a woman's only hiking trip, just to get used to it. You have to put up with men in the outback eventually, but, it's the way it goes.
And I also think a lot of women that are interested in backpacking have trouble finding other people to do it with. And so, they don't have friends or family that do it. And so a lot of the women that come out on my trips are, it's just them. And so they want to join another group and maybe make some friends too.
I'm sure that's great. And if people would, I've not warned you about any of this, by the way, but if people would like to come on a trip with you, what's your pitch? What would you say? What's your elevator pitch for it?
So my elevator pitch is that I always tell my hikers this, is that my goal is to get you to a place where you feel comfortable going on your own backpacking trip after you're done with me. I want you to learn while you're out here. So it's not a glamping trip. It's not like I'm not going to carry all your stuff for you. You're going to come out and you're going to do the work, but I'm going to teach you how to do it. So I want you to feel safe and to feel comfortable and confident so that someday if you want to go out with your friends or if you want to go out on a solo trip, that you've got the skills and the tools to do that.
I'm glad you had an elevator pitch because I didn't know whether you would or not because we didn't talk about that at all. So where can people get a hold of you then?
So you can find me on social media. I've got Facebook and an Instagram, Wildwood Hiking Company, and also online. My website is www.wildwoodhiking.com.
Yep.
Any of those.
Well, you've shared your social media with me and also your website. I'll put all of those links in the show notes. And I admire you for doing it. It's not the easiest thing in the world, I should think. Quite intimidating when you first went out there, but you're doing it. And I see you've got quite a few trips coming up. So I can only wish you well. And thanks for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Take it easy, okay? Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Nicole said a bunch of really interesting things there with a lot of sort of gained wisdom. I wrote a few of them down. The first thing I wrote was when she said, I can do anything. We hear that from many of our guests, particularly women, by the way, as many of them feel the enormity of the task ahead when they start, but they work it out, and day by day they get there, until they stand on the brown sign at Katahdin. For most of us, it's an accomplishment that translates as permission to try hard things, because they've done the AT. And there were other things that she said, like the fact that she realised after her injury on Blood Mountain that she tried to do too much too fast. To me, that's the best advice I ever give. Don't set off like a train. Ease yourself into the hike. It will serve you well later on. And there are other things that brought out the teacher in her. The mountains are humbling. There are no easy days on the AT. This stuff you learn, and while I'm not experienced in her guiding trips, I'm sure she'd have that same mix of common sense and experience to help anybody who wants to learn how it's done. I've added links to reach out to her in the show notes. Now, with a bloody nuisance dog in the background, here's Dave from Franklin, North Carolina. Well, for our second report from the trail, it's Dave again. How are you, Dave?
Doing great, Mighty Blue. Coming from Franklin, North Carolina.
Ooh, how about that? So, I think you sent me, I've got a couple of messages, one from you last Wednesday and then now today. You're 115 miles into it, which means you've gone up Albert Mountain.
Oh, Albert Mountain.
How'd that work for you?
It was okay, but it was completely fogged and sucked in. It was terrible weather. It was wind was blowing sideways, and it was raining from the moisture of the fog from the trees. So it didn't rain, but it kept dripping. It was all day. It was kind of this drippy rain, even though it wasn't raining. So no views, zero.
It doesn't actually look on the map terribly steep because it's kind of short. It's not a very long way up, but my gosh, it's almost vertical, isn't it?
It is. In fact, you look at the profile, and I think it was, I don't know if it was like 0.1 miles or something like that, but it was like 400 feet. It's just like it's climbing a staircase, right?
Yeah, it was great. Though. I loved it, and that's the 100-mile mark of virtue, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to get the picture with the tower, right?
That's right. Yeah, and you say you've had an issue with your sleeping pad. So what sort of issue you had then?
It leaked, everybody, and it's one of those things where I could spend hours and trying to find a bathtub and look for the pinhole. And I have an extra one at home. It's not like I bought extras on purpose, but it was the second choice one that I chose not to take. And so I just contacted my wife, and she's shipped it out to me on second day area. It was like $30-something as opposed to either buying a new pad or trying to, anyway, I'm just happier with moving on, and it's unfortunate, but what
You've just got to get it right, though. Sleep is such an important part. How are you sleeping, by the way?
Not great yet, and that's okay. It's normal for me not to sleep well when I'm not home, and it takes me a little while. And so
you got about 6 months of not sleeping. Excellent. Yeah.
Well, that's certainly pretty likely. Or the tent becomes home, and then you start getting used to it. So it was okay. I mean, everything's been fine. Not as cold the last few nights. The sleep pad was working fine until I was on the ground in the middle of the night. In the middle of a storm, too.
You've had some weather, I know. And I'm going back to the one you sent me the other day. You said you made it to Dix Creek Gap after pushing from Unicoi to Deep Cap. 13 miles. That's quite an early 13 miler, isn't it?
Yeah, and that 13 miles comes at 43 400 feet of elevation gain. It was a good day.
What made you want to do that?
It's becoming little tiny bits of logistics more than anything else, right? It's the point-to-point logistics. It's what's the best kind of day. Either fall short at like 7 or 8 miles, not short, but I mean, or you kind of push forward. And so I had another 4,400 mile day 2 days ago, over 11 something miles. So it was, that was actually tougher. It was tougher in the sense you've compacted the elevation.
Sure. We learn things when we start this hike. And has anything that surprised you so far?
No, I think nothing. Well, one thing I think I say no, and I realized one thing that surprised me is I was expecting the majority of the people I meet to be the early youngsters, right? The early 20-somethings.
Sure.
And they seem to be in short order for some reason. There are some, but I'm finding late 20s, early 30s to be very common, and a great big scattering of everything in between. There's no concentration of age groups, is maybe what I'm trying to say. And so that's cool too.
And you stayed at the Green Dragon, which I've stayed at with Bill and Donna.
Yes.
Tell everybody about the hostel, because it's pretty damn cool, isn't it?
Green Dragon Hostel is fantastic, and it's one of those unfortunate experiences that if it's the first hostel you stop at, you set your expectations going forward based on what you get there. And so those expectations are not always going to be met.
They're definitely not. I can guarantee you that.
Right. Bill and Donna are fantastic. They do a great job with treating their guests with hospitality, and they do a nice breakfast. Just everything about it. They've got just enough room. You're still in the bunk rooms, but you're not that cramped. It's it's just a really pleasant place to be.
They're well spread out, and it's very well set up, isn't it? And they've obviously given it a lot of thought how they do it.
Absolutely. I ended up spending 2 nights there. I did but not consecutive nights. And so, again, logistically, it worked out to do that and to get picked up at so it worked out, and I did 2 non-consecutive nights. It worked out well.
And you had Trail Magic at Hogpen Gap from the church group, which is exactly what happened to me. I had Trail Magic at Hogpen Gap by church group as well. So it may not be the same church, but those people down south, they like looking after you, don't they?
They were fantastic, and we had been coming northbound, and a Sobo hiker, whether he was Sobo or just a day hiker, say, "Hey, there's Trail Magic coming up," and of course your eyes light up, and you're like, "Woohoo!" And then we dropped down into the previous gap. I think it was Tesnati Gap, something like that. Tesnati, and there was a little cardboard sign, Trail Magic Head. So you had to climb up and over to get to Hogpen. But we're like, hey, we're rolling. So they had a beautiful Caribbean black bean soup, but they had everything, Steve. They were set up not just as a hiker feed, but toiletries, sundries, anything you wanted, you could have taken. You could have resupplied there if you wanted to.
Nice. Those people are so giving. And funnily enough, you're in Franklin, where also we had pancake breakfast with some church group as well. Oh, you doing that as well?
Did it this morning.
Excellent.
First Baptist Church. God, those are beautiful people. It was fantastic. Right. They're so loving and giving. They want to give you one 30-second sermon, and it's just a prayer on you more than anything else to wish you good tidings and all that, and and I'm okay with that. I used to do pancake breakfasts when I put them on when I was working with the men's group in my Catholic church when my girls were at school there. So I almost felt it was, I hate to call it a reward, but it was kind of, for the tens of thousands of pancakes I cooked over those years, to get a couple back, it was fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you say that you're feeling good physically and mentally. I'm sure you're missing your wife and missing home and so on. But do you rationalize it in your head, or you knew this was going to happen? Are you quite comfortable physically and mentally?
Well, I mean, I'll start with the missing my wife. And so that part is, you rationalize it a little bit because it's only been a week and a half. So we've had this amount of separation for various reasons before, right? So for the moment, it's okay because it hasn't been that long. And I check in with her every day. I send her Garmin messages if I'm out of cell connection.
Nice.
I paid for the plan that gives me unlimited messages so I could just use it without consideration. I FaceTime called her a couple times, and she's shipping me the package for my replacement pad. So for that's okay. Mentally, otherwise, I'm doing great. I'm having fun. It's hard enough, but it isn't killing me, at least yet. Little aches and pains, everything like those transient pains we talked about, right?
That's right.
It's in my foot, it's in my knee,
That's
it's in
right.
my hip,
All the
it's in my
time.
this.
All the time.
It's like a lonely pain looking for some place to, friends to hang out with or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you don't want it to settle down anywhere. You're okay.
No,
let it keep moving
on.
And the text you sent me last Wednesday, you mentioned that there was a big storm coming this weekend. Well, you're at this weekend. So what happened?
Well, okay, so that was last night, and so I got into the Grove yesterday. So we pushed over Albert Mountain we were at Carter Gap, I think it was. So yesterday was 11-ish miles, not too bad. The elevation was only like 2,000 feet of gain, but that bit over Albert, of course. And that dropped us down to Rock Gap. I'm just losing my gaps.
There's so many damn gaps. Yeah, there's so many damn gaps.
Then they become
just say Sassafras Mountain. Anybody asks you about a mountain, there's loads of them.
Right. So we kind of raced ahead. It was the night before when the sleeping pad went down. The wind was howling all night, and it was dropping fog and rain on us all night. And everybody was worried. I mean, there were warnings out. The ATC sent warnings out. So the night was it was fine, but I was now concerned about the trees overhead. I had looked at them before I set up my tent. And then I was getting ready for bed. It was still semi-light, and I'm looking at this one tree, and it's kind of leaning a weird way. I'm like, So I spent the night kind of half awake, half asleep. But I'm like, what are you going to do? If you're awake and it crashes down on you, or if you're asleep, it crashes down on you, you're just as dead, or just
it's
as
the same
vain.
result. Yeah, it's exactly the same result. Yeah, so don't worry about it.
So I finally got to sleep, but we pushed out the next morning intentionally to come here to Franklin, to push to Franklin to get ahead of the storm, which actually didn't roll in until 9-10 p.m. There was a lot of moisture moved around. The hike we went on today, we found new blowdowns. It wasn't today was an easy day. We did a reverse Sobo slack pack, so it's my first slack pack. Boy, is it beautiful, Steve.
Oh yeah. You definitely feel it, don't you? It's fantastic.
I felt like I was walking on air all day long.
And you pass over into North Carolina, obviously.
Yes.
It's a great moment, isn't it? And it suddenly comes upon you, doesn't it? The sign on the tree.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you know it's coming because you're tracking the miles, you're tracking your far out. But then all of a sudden it's like this. What you see is that weird rusty pipe, which is kind of growing into the tree.
That's right. Yes.
On the trail side. Yes. You see that from just go. That's weird. This rusty pipe growing in the tree. Then you realize the sign is on that as well. And luckily for me, I was hiking with a couple of people at that point, so we all sat there. We had lunch there. We got some pictures there of us as a group and individually with the sign. So I wasn't alone having to try to figure out how to photograph myself in that spot. Is that
the three other hikers you mentioned in the text today?
One of them, one was this gal that I'm hiking with. So shout out to Ahoy. You have to say ahoy, ahoy, or at least you end up doing it when you see her, right? Because she worked on a cruise ship for a time, and so she got that day one. It just came up and it stuck, right? Right. So we were together that day. The other two hikers, young guys, they're slightly ahead of us today, but we're all going to catch up together at the Knock.
Right. Nice.
And so we'll be all together at the Knock. So my next couple days are tomorrow is another slack because I got to wait for my package to arrive.
Keep slacking. Enjoy it. Don't worry about it.
But it's going to be 13 odd miles and 3,000 feet of gain. So it's still a day, but it gives me an easy day dropping down, which I know the climb down. But it's Tellico Gap down to the Knock. It's a lot of downhill, so it's an easy day. It's like 8 miles. But yeah, it's going to be hard on the knees going down.
If hope the wind's not blowing too much, it's quite an exposed bit, especially down into the Knock. In fact, one of our listeners and one of the ladies who was one of my previous Mighty Blue classes, Betty, she turned back from there. Okay. It was a bit too much for her at the time. I promised her if she ever goes back there, I'm going to go through it with her.
Right. We have the group that I'm hiking with is so it's all youngsters, as I mentioned to you, which is funny because I enjoy the energy. To me, I'm more sort of in tune with the energy of the youngsters. So we've got 25, 27, and 31 years old. And for the moment, we're going to all hike together through the Smokies. So call it a tramley, call it whatever you want. The two guys need to push on faster. After that, they've got harder deadlines one of them's a teacher, and he's got to get back by the end of July. So that was the whole thing. And then do me a favor. I'm going to give a shout out to Katie, hiker Bougie, who's one of your listeners, been listening to you forever. And she says, if you don't get my name on Steve's Mighty Blue podcast, I'm going to be so disappointed. So we hiked around each other the first couple of days, and at the Green Dragon, I saw her.
I'd written it down. I gone through all the text and I highlighted the bits I wanted to talk about. The last
there
one
we go. I'm sorry.
was Katie. So did she know you from being on the podcast then?
Yes, sir. So she had friended me on Facebook sometime after we had done some of the original podcast about it, and so she had. Nice. And then it's just random. She happened to be at the lodge in Amicalola the same day I arrived, and then kind of circling around.
Well, Katie, in that case, when you get finished, and you're doubtless going to finish, contact me and we'll get you on the show, and you can share your story about meeting Dave.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, well, look, great to catch up. Enjoy it. Keep safe, keep sane, and just have fun at Knock, which is a wonderful place.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Knock, and then the Smokies after that. Fontana Dam.
Exciting times, eh?
Exciting. Thank you.
Everybody, take it easy. Bye.
Okay, bye.
He's making adjustments along the way. You have to be flexible on this hike. Stuff happens to our gear, to us, and we just have to adapt along the way. But most of all, you have to embrace it. And you can hear from his voice that he's doing just that as he heads towards the Smokies with his new impromptu Tremley. I look forward to hearing what he gets up to next. Now, with considerably better musical choices, though with the same kind of muted sound to avoid legal jeopardy, here's Beth, who has just over a week to go before she heads out. So we're back on with Beth. Hey, Beth, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Now, we're going to be listening to the songs you chose as a list for your hike. And I must say, a few of them are quite emotional, aren't they? Was it difficult to narrow it down to 8?
Oh, my gosh, it's impossible. It's impossible. So I was listening to an MP3 player I had, and I'm like, oh, I love that song too. I love that song too. Yeah. So it was fun, though. It was fun.
What didn't quite make the cut? What was number 9? Do you remember?
So I will tell you what the next one was. Staying Alive by the Bee Gees, because that's the song that you listen to or that you sing to yourself if you're doing CPR on someone. Oh. Like, that's the tempo.
Good Lord, I had no idea. And it's somewhat appropriate as well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So when you were thinking about this list, what were you hoping it was going to represent to you? What was it going to mean to you?
Wow. I don't know. I guess maybe who I am and
is it who you've become recently, or who you are now, or who you have always been?
I think probably who I am now. You know, being in my 50s, I feel like a totally different person than I was in my 20s. Just more grounded, less crazy.
Imagine what it's like for me then. My 20s were bloody 50 years ago, woman. I was literally an entirely different era.
Oh, gosh.
It feels like eons ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure does.
So listen here, what you've chosen as your first. It's one of my old favourites for pretty obvious reasons, I suppose, for what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm going to be 500 miles. Like, it's a great song, first of all, but I think I started really appreciating it when we went on the Camino, and I knew that it was going to be 500 miles from St. John to Santiago, and thought to myself, 500 miles, just, it seems so overwhelming. And, so every once in a while when I'd be walking, I'd be singing it to myself, 500 miles, I will walk 500 more, it's a great song for that. And every once in a while you hear people on the Camino kind of singing that.
Because it is a long darn way.
Yes.
And then on the Appalachian Trail, you've got to do it about 4.5 times. So, you got quite a few. I remember my brother, I called him up. When we were kids, we used to go on holiday with our parents. We used to drive to Wales on the other side of the country. It was 320 miles exactly. And I remember ringing him after 300 miles on my AT hike. And I said, I've just walked the distance we used to travel all day in the car with mum and dad, back in the 50s and 60s. And he was so blown away by that number. I called him again at 600 miles. Then I called him again at 900 miles. And I saw you did this great post on Facebook. After 900 miles, he said, my brother Steve has just walked 900 miles. It's a bit like us driving all the way across the country to go to Wales, wondering if we've left the iron on back home, driving back there, turning the iron off and going back to Wales again. So, always crack me up there. So there's your 500. So there's your 500 miles. And now that of course starts with a walking theme, but now the walking theme stretches into the mountains. So let's talk about number 2.
Oh, yeah. So Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Love this song. It's such a great song. And I think when I used to run, I used to be doing the actions to it because it put me in a good mood. And it's a great running song. It's like there's no obstacles that you can't overcome. And you know, it's a great song for any kind of, I don't know, adventure you're going on, or any kind of dream that you have, and that you can get through anything.
It's funny, actually. You sent me the best version. I saw Diana Ross sing it live at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and that was sensational. But no one sings like Marvin Gaye, do they?
I know. And Tammy Terrell, they're both just perfect in it, and it's just it's such a great song. It just puts you in a kind of like, I can do anything kind of mood. And
sure. Yeah. You need that, let me tell you.
Yes.
Now, the next 3, I've sort of peripherally heard of them, I guess, over the years. They're kind of life-affirming, kind of defiant songs, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's go through them. And so the first one, I haven't actually got the list of which one it is now. So let's start with the first one. But I know it's 3
My Life by
songs.
Bon Jovi.
Oh, right.
I love Bon Jovi because that was my teenage years kind of Bon Jovi. Big hair and, the whole business.
You had the big hair?
Oh, God, everybody did. It was
Beth,
horrible.
Beth, you need to send me a picture.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Look at those pictures. I think, how much hairspray did it take? I don't know. God, that was not a good hair decade,
right.
I think.
So it's My Life. I don't even know that song. I've heard it once,
it's a great song. It's just, it says, it's my life. It's now or never. I ain't going to live forever. I just want to live while I'm alive. And I think that that's everything. I don't want to just exist. I want to live my life. I want to be alive while I can, and do what I can. And no one's promised tomorrow. So you gotta do it.
Sure. Quite right too. So that was number 4. Number 4.
Yeah.
What's number 5?
Oh, This Is Me on The Greatest Showman, which is such a great song. I mean, just really self-affirming. This is me. This is who I want to be. Reaching for the sun. Yeah, that's what we've become, warriors. And I like that song because I think when you get older, you really do become who you want to be. Maybe less fearful, less worried about.
Well, you should become who you want to be.
Yeah, you should become.
Not everybody does become who they want to be, unfortunately. And it's listening to that. I listened to that song this morning, and then there's also a video on of them making it, they're preparing for it.
Yes,
that's probably even better because it's so raw, isn't it?
Yes, and when she starts singing, she's just like, I don't remember if she was sitting or if she was behind or she was like kind of timid. And then she just gets out there and she just celebrates who she is. Yeah. And like the whole cast, that video is so great because the whole cast is just, they're totally into it. And, and they're really believing the whole song about like, this is me. This is who I'm meant to be. This is what I am now. And, like a whole, extension of who hopefully who you become after years and years, that you're not there when you're young, but you do become that person that you hope
You're
you
the sum
can
of all
be.
your experiences. That's what we all
Yeah.
are. We are the sum of everything we've done, good, bad, and indifferent. I've always said, that people have asked me in the past, because I've had a somewhat checkered life over the years, different wives and girlfriends and stuff like that. And they always say, are you happy with how you are? I always think, all the crap I've done over the years, all the bad things I've done and the good things I've done have led me to this place right now. And if I'm happy in this place right now, it was kind of worth it.
Yeah.
So that's how I've always felt about it. It may be a self-justification for bad behaviour, but it isn't really meant to be. It's more all those different experiences have led me to the bloke I am now, and I'm okay with him. He's not too bad, He's still alive and he's still doing stuff. So
I
felt
think it can help you empathize with people who are maybe young, and going through stuff, and you think,
it'll work
we all
out.
did things that we wish we wouldn't have done, maybe, but it does make us who we are, and maybe we're more caring, more empathetic, more
Sure.
human.
Yeah. I'm definitely more human. I think I'm definitely more empathetic. I never used to be at all until I started hiking, and that is a big difference for me. So, before we come to number 6, which did make me laugh, by the way, number 5. Talk about number 5.
Oh, let's see. Number 5 was Brave by Sarah Bareilles. Oh, I love this song. Oh my gosh. It's just awesome, because everything that is a challenge is going to require that bravery. And I think when you lose a spouse, like I lost Wayne 3 years ago, things become fearful. It was a very weird thing for me, because I always kind of did what I wanted to do and didn't feel fearful about things. And then a friend of mine had said to me just about a week ago, he said, when you lose a spouse, it's like losing a limb.
Sure.
And you're off balance. And I think that's very true. I think that, like, sometimes your spouse or your partner or whatever becomes kind of a safety net, even though you don't maybe use them as that, but you know that they're always there. And so,
without taking them for granted, of course.
Right.
That's a given, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I always knew that Wayne would, if I fell, Wayne would pick me up, dust me off, and shove me back out into the world. But,
Nicely put.
but so I've become where I feel like I have to be brave, and that is a new feeling. I think I always felt that way, but I really feel it now, even maybe more so, where I'm like, this is a brave thing. And I'm glad I'm doing it.
Damn right.
But it does take a little bit of gumption.
Yeah. I know that for me, you say it's losing a spouse. I've never, actually I've discarded a few spouses, but never lost one. But for me, it was like, it wasn't like losing a leg. It was like when my mother died, like losing a little piece of my heart. Which will never be replaced.
Right.
There's like that hole in your heart that's just always there. And I think about that every time her birthday comes up or the anniversary of her passing comes up. And, it's yet another year gone. I've now been alive quite a bit longer without my mother than I was with my mother.
Isn't that a crazy thing to think about?
Yeah, shocking thing. It frightens the crap out of me. So now, number 6 was a little bit of a surprise for me, which is this does not fit the image of you I have in my mind, Beth. So talk about number 6.
Well, number 6 is It's Raining Men by the Weather Girls.
Woo-hoo.
And it is so fun. It's the most fun song ever. I am not crazy about rain. I do not like it. I do not like it when I'm walking. I do not like it when I'm hiking. I do not like it when I'm running. But if I can listen to this when I'm walking, when I'm hiking, even if it's raining bad, this is what I'll be singing in my head: is "It's Raining Men, Hallelujah."
The other thing I was laughing about this morning was I assumed that was your answer, and kind of I wasn't sure I was expecting anything else, but I was assuming that was your answer, and I was thinking to myself that. You singing all these songs out loud, you're never going to see any wild animals out there if you're singing It's Raining Men out loud. I can guarantee that. We used to play trail karaoke when we were out there. We were singing, and we hardly saw any else. But basically, you have to sing the song and they have to name the artist. And some people are terrible singers out on trail, I'll tell you.
Well,
so try that out.
I'm not a very good singer. And I have this thing where I only know about 2 lines of every song. That's about all I know.
Now, number 7 is, I suspect, about you and Wayne. Obviously, your late husband. And it's a beautiful, beautiful song. So tell us about that.
So Live Like You Were Dying by Tim McGraw. I mean, he's just a great artist. And the song is great because you have to live like you were dying. I mean, you have to do the things while you can do them. And you aren't promised tomorrow. You gotta, go skydiving and Rocky Mountain climbing and 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. I haven't done that, but
good.
but I mean, I just think it's a good reminder to all of us that you got to do the things while you can do them. When Andrew and I talked about doing the Appalachian Trail, which I always say he suggested, and he says I suggested. I don't know who did, but anyway, I said I got to do this while I can still do it. So we got to do it now, and he was all for it. So, yeah.
Did you know that lesson before Wayne passed?
I think I did because, like, one time Wayne had said to me, "When I retire, we should go to Antarctica," and I said, "Why are we waiting?" And he never did end up retiring, and so, like, that's important. It's important to do the things that you want to do and not wait.
Sure. Great song as well. Great song.
Yeah.
And your last one is another old favorite of mine. It's such a beautiful song that one of my former nephews, I suppose the former nephew, he's the nephew of an ex-wife of mine, he said he loves this song so much he doesn't have it in his collection because he doesn't want to overplay it because he doesn't want ever not to love it, which is pretty cool.
Oh,
yeah. So,
that's good because sometimes you can get kind of sick of a
too
song.
Available. Too available. So anyway, tell us what it is.
Oh, okay. So it's What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. And it's got to be Louis Armstrong. I'm sorry, but it does. Yeah. And it's just it really makes me happy about being in nature and appreciating beautiful things. And it's just a great song. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful song, and it's a touching song. And
it's the way he performs it as well. He's just so magnificent.
Yeah, boy, it's there's just so many good things in life, and I think sometimes you can get bogged down by what's going on in the world, what's going on in your family, whatever, and to really stop and appreciate the beauty of things, and I don't know,
just be present. Be present.
Yeah, be present. Be present. That's exactly it.
And in that, by the way, and this is kind of counterintuitive for what we're talking about, having music. You don't wear headphones when you're hiking, do you? Or do you?
Sometimes if I would be alone, I would probably be more apt to wear them. Or if I really just need
that should be a complete reverse. That should be the complete reverse. If you're by yourself, you want to be aware of everything going on around you. I know.
And a lot of times I'll just put one, earbud in. But I think the only time I'll probably use it is probably if I really need something to just get me up a hill, and it's just ain't no mountain high enough, maybe.
No, I think it's Raining Men. It will be the one that people will remember you by.
I just love that one.
That's hilarious. Okay, well, look, great choices, and not a single ball-aching music amongst them like Dave had last week. So I'm particularly pleased about that. I
didn't really recognize all of his either.
All right, Beth. Well, look, lovely to talk to you, and really, we are now getting down to the final thoughts because next week that's what we're going to talk about. Your final concerns and issues about what's going to happen, and just how much you're goddamn looking forward to it. So we'll catch up then. Okay.
Sounds great. Okay, thanks.
Cheers, Beth. Cheers. Bye. She's definitely a laugher, isn't she? It's funny. I wasn't sure how well these interviews with Beth would go because I kind of know her and I've hiked with her a couple of times. You learn a lot about a person in those unguarded moments on trail, and we both had some of those moments out there that are just between us and our fellow hikers. So I wondered if it would translate across to these conversations. I needn't have worried. She's just how I remembered her, and I think that she's going to be, like Dave, a joy to follow as they both head north. Finally today, we get the second part of the last chapter of Emily Leonard's Happy Hiking. In this section, the girls leave Monson behind and head out into the 100-mile wilderness. Though Batman, of course, is never too far away. I'll see you next week. Earlier, we had thought we were on autopilot and the days flew by. Sometimes it was hard to remember when one day ended and the next began. It was all becoming a blur. Now we were on cruise control. Batman dropped us off at the beginning of the 100-mile wilderness. We hiked 14.3 miles to Long Pond Stream. On the other side of the stream sat Batman, waiting for us. We forded the swift thigh-high river with the help of a rope tied between two trees on either side of the stream. Once we were safely across, Batman escorted the girls half a mile along an unmarked trail to a small dead-end parking lot where the car and our gear waited. I stayed back to rest my feet. Hiking high miles had brought back my foot misery. They gathered their gear, Batman grabbed ours and a pizza he had brought from town. Not only were we slack packing, we had pizza delivery in the 100-mile wilderness. The next morning, we did it all over again. We packed up, took our stuff back to the car, grabbed our slack packs and headed north. 16 miles later, we were at West Branch Pleasant River. This area is called Gulf Haggis, a popular hiking destination for locals and tourists. All the tent sites were full. Maps and Moxie managed to find a spot just inside the woods off the parking lot. Batman and I pitched my tent in front of the car in the parking lot. The sun went down and morning came. Third day in the wilderness, and we were still slacking. This time, we only did 14.4 miles to Logan Brook Road. Again, Batman met us. No pizza this time. Subway sandwiches were on the menu. We must have been the best fed through hikers on this section of the trail. Batman couldn't stay this night. He was headed out to watch our son Patch play football for UMaine. The girls and I stealth camped just off the road in the woods next to the trail. It was a peaceful place with tall hardwoods and leaf-littered soft ground, and no one else around. Even though we were slack packing, we were still tired at the end of the day, and we all fell asleep quickly. I was snoozing quite well, which was not the norm for me when my dreams were interrupted by a familiar and unsettling noise. In the daytime, I would have welcomed the intruder, but not at night as I lay helpless in my tent. Spending many years in the woods in the fall at this exact time of year, I knew all too well what was headed for my tent: a moose. I knew I could not survive the massive animal stumbling on me as I was lying down, so I sat up quickly. My air mattress is the lightest one on the market, but that lightness comes at a price. It's also the noisiest pad. When I sat up, the pad, sounding like a potato chip bag, scared the poor creature and he took off. I braced myself for impact as I heard hoofs scuffing the leafy ground and antlers clanging in the trees. I do believe my heart stopped for a brief second, and I only breathed once I heard Maps and Moxie yelling from their tent, "Black Bear, are you okay? What the hell was that?" That, my dear friends, was your main moose. We could hear the monster trotting up the road, then it came back down the road. Only once silence could be heard for a long time did I dare attempt to drift away. I never did make it back to La La Land. I couldn't relax enough to fall asleep soundly. In the morning, I investigated the events of the night. I discovered my tent was in the middle of a well-worn animal trail. I guess I had it coming. There were moose tracks and leaves kicked up less than 5 feet from my head. It was by the sure grace of God that the beast did not get tangled in my guy lines and land on top of me. Further discovery showed where he had run up and down the dirt road. My presence must have confused him even more than his meanderings scared me. Day 4, we were packed up and ready to go, this time with all our gear. The terrain for the day looked pretty mild, and the weather looked even better. With only one little bump, less than a 700-foot climb, we were ready to go from cruise to overdrive. We had 18 miles to cover to keep the pace for our itinerary. Before we knew it, another day was in the journal. Waking up next to Joe Merry Lake was a wonderful way to start the next day. The sun's golden rays bouncing off the ripples of the lake's surface was an invite to get going for another wonderful day on the trail. This time we had 19.2 miles as our goal, bringing us to Pollywog Stream, where we would be reunited with Batman. We arrived just in time to set up camp along the stream and cook dinner on the bridge as the sun went down. We finished our hike and meals, aided by our headlamps, and were serenaded by a cricket orchestra. Who needs $100 tickets to a concert when you can enjoy dinner and a show free of charge in God's country? The 6th and final day of the 100-mile wilderness meant I was on the final spread of my guidebook, the AT Guide by David Awol Miller. The book was 223 pages of everything we needed to know to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail. When I first received my copy, I was a little overwhelmed with all the information it contained and the sheer magnitude of the trail. And now on this day, I could open it up and see the end. As much as I wanted to be done, I had a flickering thought of climbing the summit in 2 days, then turning around and doing the book backward for a southbound hike, also known as a yo-yo. But that's all it was, a tiny flicker of thought that burned out as fast as it ignited. At that moment, though, through all my misery, I now understood why some hikers actually do just that. Pumped up and ready to go, Maps, Moxie and I once again gave our gear to Batman and donned our schoolgirl matching day packs. We headed off for our final day in the wilderness, with only 17.2 miles to go. It was another beautiful, hot, sunny day in the Maine woods, so hot that we went swimming in Rainbow Lake. I was always up for a dip in the cool waters. Maps and Moxie were more reserved, but this day was extra hot, and the crystal clear lake was just beckoning us to take a plunge. The only dilemma was that we didn't have our full packs, so we didn't have any dry clothes. We were not about to hike in wet ones. We hadn't had any chafing on the trail yet, and we weren't about to get any for the last days, ruining our summit climb. So the only natural thing to do was to skinny dip. Since we'd entered the 100-mile wilderness, we hadn't seen any other hikers during the day. We figured we were safe. The trail followed the lake, and we found a spot with a large flat rock surrounded by a few smaller ones. We undressed and enjoyed the freedom from our sweaty clothes. There was no easy access to the water, and as we were trying to figure the best way to lower ourselves into the water from the rocks, we heard an engine. For real? We were out in the middle of nowhere. We looked up, and just over the tree line on the opposite shore came a float plane, and it landed right in front of us. What were we to do? We couldn't dive in, too many rocks. We couldn't slide in fast. Rug burns, ouch. So we waved, then continued safely getting into the water to cool off. I do believe he tipped his wings. The swim felt so good we didn't want to leave, but we still had about 8 miles to go. We hopped out of the water, each claiming her own rock to dry off on. We had our little camp towels, so we weren't completely unprepared. We needed those to dry off our feet after all the water fords. Maine doesn't build bridges of any sort across the brooks and streams. I'm not sure why, but my guess is the spring running from the snowmelt would probably just take out any bridge. None of us were dressed. We were still toweling off when we heard clink, 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 the distinctive sound of hiking poles on rock. No way, not another person coming. What were the chances of that? First a plane lands, now a hiker. We hadn't seen anyone on the trail in days. I grabbed my skimpy towel and held it over the important parts. I looked up and saw Osha, an older gentleman we had been leapfrogging up the trail in the past. I grinned and said, "Hello, please just keep hiking." He said nothing as he clinked along with eyes straining to keep forward. A few miles later we climbed Rainbow Ledges. At the top was Osha, having a break and enjoying the view of Katahdin. Being the shy character that I am, I asked him, which view was better, this one or the last one? He replied, this one. He didn't get my joke. I was referring to the view of us naked girls. He quickly then said with a sly grin, "Oh, that one. No, that last view was definitely better." Osha left and we snacked while enjoying the view of Katahdin. This was the second time we saw her. We had been view-starved for a few days while we were in the lowlands. There were plenty of lakes, streams, ponds and woods to enjoy, but no mountaintop vistas. 3 days before, when we climbed Whitecap Mountain, there was a normal shrubby alpine growth and rocky top. Off to the left, barely visible, was a trail carved through the stunted, shoulder-height trees. In the beginning, I investigated all I could, but after hiking 2,100 miles, I seldom went off trail to chase extra sights. My feet did not want to do any more than necessary, but that day I pushed my way past the trees. A force I had no control over nudged me to scope out where the hidden trail was leading. On the other side, I was caught off guard by my first view of Katahdin. I yelled to Maps and Moxie to come and see. It was unbelievable. There she was off in the distance, standing solo, the highest point on the horizon, and she had called me to her. I felt the dampness of a tear trickle down my cheek and the salty taste on my lips. They were tears of joy and overwhelming accomplishment mixed with tears of sadness that it all soon would be over. This second view of Katahdin didn't have the power of the first, but it was still impressive. At almost a mile high, she stands taller than any other peak in Maine. Katahdin seems to rise up out of the ground with a presence all her own, dwarfing anything around her. Percival Proctor Baxter said, "Man is born to die," His works are short-lived. Buildings crumble, monuments decay, wealth vanishes. But Katahdin, in all its glory, forever shall remain the mountain of the people of Maine. Refueled from our snack break, refreshed from our swim, we took off to finish the last 6 miles of the 100-mile wilderness. Batman hiked in to meet us, as he had done other times whenever he could. It was simply amazing. He would leave us at point A, then do whatever he needed to do to navigate his way around back roads and through small towns to point B. If there was time, he would hike south and join us on the trail. I never grew tired of seeing his smiling face and his camera pointed in our direction to capture every moment possible. Right before we reached the Golden Road, he ran ahead so he could capture us exiting the 100-mile wilderness. The hoots, yells and cheers, together with the clanging of our hiking poles, were loud and proud. We did it. Another milestone on the Appalachian Trail completed. We walked the short distance on the Golden Road, a dirt-logging road in the North Main woods, to Able Bridge. The bridge has one lane for vehicles and a divided section for snow sleds and pedestrians. The bridge is an iconic structure crossing the west branch of the Penobscot River. In the middle, a broad view of Katahdin can be seen jutting above the trees. From where I stood on the bridge, a mere 16 miles separated me from Baxter Peak. Another sobering thought reminded me the journey was coming to an end. That night we camped at Able Pines along the shore of the Kennebec River. It was a quiet night. Not much talking took place. I was lost in my own thoughts of the last 6 months. My guess was, so were Maps and Moxie.